Welcome to a virtual coffee encounter, brought to you by the Holocaust Remembrance Association.
Okay, so we are here on, we are calling this a virtual coffee encounter.
Wonderful.
Rosalie and Chris and Dr. Zsuzsanna and Emanuel, hosted by Holocaust Remembrance Association. And to honor you, Dr. Ozsvath, I'm drinking from my cup from Schopron.
Oh, you do?
Yes. And Chris, what coffee cup are you drinking from?
Mine is from Tartu, because I have a Russian friend who died, and she had been married to a Jewish man in the Soviet Union, and her son is now a PhD scholar in Germany. and the grandmother lives in Tartu, Estonia.
So you have to tell us about your cup, Emanuel. We're talking to you. It's 4 in the morning at this time, like in Jerusalem. Tell us about your cup.
My cup is from Jerusalem.
All right.
Everything comes out of Zion, the Torah and everything else, including the cup.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we just want to thank, and Zsuzsi, Dr. Ozsvath, you have a special cup to show us today. Next time I'll prepare you more. It might be from China.
I don't have a special, I only have Princeton. It is written on it, Princeton.
That's very special.
And that's special because you're living in Princeton, right?
That is right.
Relax and enjoy this wonderful chat with 2 scholars and people who have really focused. I would say all 4 of us have pretty much focused on Tikkun Olam, right? Healing of the world.
Right.
Emanuel Rund helped start in a very important Holocaust holiday. We'll tell you soon. And Dr. Ozsvath helped start a very important center in a certain place, and we'll tell you soon. We'll be right back.
Touching hearts, expanding understanding, impacting actions. The vision of the Holocaust Remembrance Association is to see the world inspired to stand in solidarity against persecution, prejudice, and indifference. Discover, learn, and partner with the Holocaust Remembrance Association's many initiatives by visiting www.hra18.org. Come back for free refills and meet friends like these, whose stories will touch hearts, expand understanding, and impact actions. Share the link with friends. Discover Holocaust Remembrance Association's virtual and live events at www.hra18.org.
Welcome back. We have very special guests today with us on our virtual coffee encounter. And we have Emanuel Rund to start with today. He fought in the 6-Day War. He helps with Israel Radio. He helped record Jerusalem, the original Jerusalem of Gold. He was a photojournalist at the age of 16. So for all of you young people watching this, and he was invited into the Knesset to document things at a young age. So you could do all things at a young age. It's not by age, right, Zsuzsi?
Right.
You work because of your being a professor. He spoke Arabic, so he was able to help do filming for the Israeli TV in Gaza and Sinai. He produced Israeli TV in New York. He is an award-winning filmmaker and producer, Oscar nominee with his movie called All Jews Out, right?
Right.
And he moved to Hollywood, realized, you know, I'm more of a social justice kind of filmmaker. Went to New York, decides and meets all of these Holocaust survivors that have the veil of silence, what we've talked about. Dr. Ozsvath, I'm sure, knows a lot about it. Her and I have talked about my own family who kept quiet. Nobody to really understand. We work with Pastor Yov Spittner, who wrote the book, The Veil of Silence, not just in survivors, but also, of course, in Nazi descendants and all. And he helped with all of that. I don't want to tell his whole story because we're going to pull that out of him, if not this interview, in our future chats that we'll be having. But he, gosh, there's so many things. Helped connect bring 35,000 survivors together in the largest Holocaust event in 1980s, when they were all keeping silent, gathered them together in Washington. Helped with 2 films with Elie Wiesel.
Dr. Ozsvath was a professor of literature and history and the Lee and Paul Lewis Chair of Holocaust Studies at UT Dallas. And I believe you just retired in August this past year, correct?
Yeah.
So she is fresh into the retirement community, but I don't believe that you really will retire.
I don't believe it either.
You are a bundle of energy. I've seen you speak, and it's very daunting. I hope I get to be like you someday. And by the way, that's not very far off for any of us. The Holocaust Studies program officially launched in 1986 at UT Dallas and quickly earned an international reputation for excellence. And that's really something impressive, that one could start a whole department that then gains international recognition. It's one of just 2 schools in the US that even offers graduate level courses in Holocaust Studies. And that Holocaust Studies program is officially called the Ackerman Center for Holocaust Studies, according to the name of the donors who were the largest funders of that. Now, Dr. Ozsvath has also published several books, and she's also a translator. So that's very dear to my heart because I'm very interested in translation myself, and she has quite a knowledge base in European literature specifically, and comes highly recommended to anyone who would read about her online. So we have some distinguished people here tonight.
So we welcome you guys. Thank you so much. We're going to start with Emanuel Rund. We're having Emanuel today. We'll have him many times in the future, but today especially because it's International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And this man, as I was reading his bio this evening and earlier today, I feel like he's the Forrest Gump of Jewish, Christian, and Holocaust relations. I really do. You're like a Forrest Gump. You seem to be in all the right places, and God has really used you. So if you could just share a little bit about the origins of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is today, January 27th.
Yeah, so as you said, I was in New York and in Hollywood and in the United States, and in 1985, I went to Germany to make my first film. It was in a small town called Leer, Ostfriesland, near the Dutch border and the North Sea, where my mother came from. And she was invited with other Jews of town after 50 years to visit their hometown. I made my first film about it, and soon thereafter, the Goethe Institute, the German Cultural Center, asked me to screen the film in the United States and in Israel. And I I made altogether 30 films dealing with the Holocaust. And when I screened them all over Germany at universities, at movie theaters, cinematheques, church communities, often came to me young people who complained that they suffer because of what their grandparents, the Nazis, did, and nobody helps them. And I decided I would like to help them. So I took a group of young Germans took them to Israel to meet the Jews of their town. And we traveled all over the country. I didn't want to put the Holocaust on them. I just wanted to let them have good friendship with the people they visit or host them. But they asked me, it was back in 1994, and they told me, Emanuel, we know that tomorrow you Jews here in Israel would have your Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day, at Yad Vashem, Holocaust Memorial Center, and we would like very much to go there. Can you arrange it? So I prayed to my little God up there and said, thank you very much. I wanted very much that they will be there. So we went there and I filmed there. At the end of the ceremony, one of them, Karen, came towards me and I asked her in German, Karen, willst du etwas sagen? Karen, do you want to say something? And she said in German, how? And how? I'm ashamed that in my country, in Germany, we don't remember the victims the way the Jews do remember their Shoah Holocaust victims. And with that, I filmed 5 films with these youngsters in Israel, meeting different, very interesting people. Each one was a film for itself, by itself. And I came back to Germany. Now in Germany, besides making films from Sunday to Friday, I was asked by the Zentralrat, the Central Committee of Jews in Germany, to serve also as a rabbi cantor in 15 communities in Germany. And then I was asked also to be on the Christian-Jewish Relations Board, where I met people, Christians from different churches and the leaders of the church communities. And at that point, I decided that I would like to help Germany have a memorial day to the Holocaust. And so I asked all the people I met, sometimes 3 times a week in big events with the Chancellor, the President of Germany, other people, leaders of education and church. I asked them to help me set up a date one day in Germany that will be Memorial Day to the Holocaust and to all the victims of the Nazis. And so since middle of 1994 until the end of 95, I kept screening my films altogether 240 times. And then I got a contact from the office of the president in Berlin, Bundespräsident Roman Herzog, and I was told that he accepted my initiative, and he proclaims today, the 3rd of January 1996, he proclaims the 27th of January, the Liberation Day of Auschwitz, to become the Memorial Day for the Holocaust and all the victims of the National Socialists. And then they started to have every year a very respectful event at the German parliament in Berlin, the Bundestag. And I was invited always as a guest of honor for the one who started it. And then then the European countries adopted my initiative. Each country did it from 1996 on throughout the beginning of the 2000s. And then in 2005, the General Secretary of the UN, Kofi Annan, proclaimed the 27th of January as the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And from then on, whenever I was in New York, I was invited as a guest of honor to the UN. 2 years ago, I was invited there together with my protagonist of my film that was Oscar nominee called All Jews Out, Alle Juden Raus. And that was Inge, and she spoke from the podium about her story during the Holocaust. And then in Israel, I was invited at the beginning of 2020, but I decided to give my seat to a Holocaust survivor. I thought that he would benefit more for himself sitting in Memorial Day to the Holocaust that is being commemorated all over the world. And so that was a story about how I initiated the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. From 1992, I worked on it for 4 years, and then 1996, the beginning, and then UN picked it up 2005.
Wow. This is, as they say in Hebrew, kol hakavod,
Toda rabah, toda rabah.
right?
Right.
I mean, this is amazing how you have been used for this. Dr. Ozsvath, do you have any questions or any comments that you have for him about this?
No, I was just mesmerized listening. I didn't think of any questions, so I didn't think of any other matter than what he was talking about. So I was listening to Mr. Rund, and that is all. I mean, maybe I could ask him the question how he felt in Germany, what his feeling was, not with special Holocaust experts, but with the general population, and how he judged the Jewish question today in Germany.
Well, I could answer that. Both my parents came to Israel from Germany, my father from Berlin, my mother from northwestern Germany. And so I had, of course, connection of hundreds of years to Germany. And when I came over, I met beautiful, very friendly people over there. But throughout the years, I was there on and off altogether about 30 years. There were, of course, those Germans who didn't like me being in, so to say, their country and making films about the Holocaust. And so I would get sometimes letters with swastikas saying something like, "Dirty Jew, get out of our country. It's our country. Don't tell our children about a Holocaust that never happened. And we'll get you, we'll kill you." And so that was threatening, but altogether, I met lovely people over there who embraced me. And without them, I wouldn't be able to stay there. And especially when my life was a little harder, when I came across some old Nazis, like the old SS man from Bergen-Belsen. And of course, I told about him to the right people who wanted to interrogate him about what was his role and to get the whole picture. But altogether, being, especially when I served in 15 Jewish communities from Friday on till Sunday morning, it was beautiful. And of course, I was invited by Christian communities to be with them and to share brotherhood, sisterhood, and especially being at the Christian-Jewish Relations Board, I met many of them. And yeah, I got to meet everybody in Germany, and that was altogether a very good time.
I have a question
Yeah.
for you, Dr. Ozsvath.
Yes.
Didn't you live in Germany after World War II?
Yes, I did. And not immediately after. We went in 1957 to Germany, and we lived in Hamburg until 1963, that my husband was invited to Austin, to University of Texas at Austin, to teach there. And he was an astronomer. And so we lived there, and I had all kinds of experiences, but also, as Emanuel said, the best. Some people were very unpleasant. There were not even some, there was one very bad experience I had. And but
What year was that?
that year was, I can't tell you precisely, 1958.
And what happened?
There was a man who played in the orchestra. He played the viola, and and I was, after the concert, that was in the Hamburg Symphony, And after the concert, we were together, he and his wife and some other people from the orchestra, whom I have known. And so I was a pianist at that time, so I knew people in the orchestra. And I also played with orchestra, so I knew people. And then somehow the discussion led to the past. And I said, I was never rude with Germans with whom I sat. Also because I had usually very important experiences in which they expressed their sadness and their shame that all of that has happened. So I said something, and then this guy jumped up so that his chair fell on the floor, and he said, I forbid you to say bad words about the Germans. They are the best people in the world, the greatest people, the greatest philosophers, the greatest writers, the greatest poets, and the greatest musicians, and you dare to say a word about them. And then he ran out of the room. So that was my bad experience, but I shouldn't talk about it because this was 1 in 6 years. And, I have met many other Germans.
And also, Dr. Ozsvath, haven't you written books, poetry in German?
Yes, I have written poetry in German. I have translated German poets into English. I have written, of course, articles in German. Yes, sure.
So you've translated German poets.
I translated German poets into English, yes.
I always thought it was interesting that you would live in Germany after the war. It was just interesting.
Well, that was a situation that has forced us to do so. So after the Hungarian Revolution, when the Russians took over, I just had enough. And my father always wanted to come away from Germany. In the 1930s, he wanted. Then there were family reasons why he didn't. Then in the 1950s, he wanted. There were family reasons that he didn't. And I was desperate. And I was a child during the German occupation of Hungary. And I knew exactly what the Germans have done in Austria when I was 6 years old, because we had friends who fled from Austria. And then the Germans came to Hungary, and we were hiding, and we were facing death every day. And all my father's and my mother's brothers and sisters were killed, and all their children. There are just a few who stayed alive because they went at that time to Palestine. But so I just had enough, and then I had this terrible scene with this guy, and I really was in despair and wanted to leave, but of course I couldn't leave. We were students in Germany, and so we stayed in Germany all together for 6 years, and that was the time when the US has very much looking for scientists, and my husband just got his PhD, and so we came to America. And from that time on, I know what it is to be a human being and not to be humiliated.
Chris, I would like, what we're going to do right now is just take a moment. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back to, Chris is going to be interviewing you, Dr. Ozsvath, a little more detail, okay? But the break is going to be about my Aunt Aggie in Auschwitz. She survived a couple of camps and survived Auschwitz. She lost both of her legs. The most wonderful person you can imagine. you would never know all these terrible things happened to her. And yet, so you're going to get a little taste of her, of an interview I did with her years ago, and then we'll be right back.
Tell us a little bit about your life before Hitler.
Before Hitler, it was the best democratic country in Europe, and we were Jewish. We had a good life until the people of Hitler in 1933 came to this country, and the tragedy of the Jewish people in Europe began in 1933, but the Germans came to our town, Košice, Slovakia. It was in 1939. Until then, we had a good life. We were in school. Father worked like a lawyer, and we were in our house, and nothing happened to us until 1939.
Specifically, how did things actually change with your school, with where you lived? How did it gradually change? Tell us.
Until 1939, it was everything good in Czechoslovakia. It was a democratic state, and the Jewish people had every privileges to learn, to study, to go to university. Since then, everything changed. It began with our father. He was a lawyer and a Jewish man. He could not work like a lawyer. It was not allowed. We were in our house, which was a very nice, good house. We were there until the German troops came to our town. Since then, we could not learn in school.
Now, you had once told me, Aggie, that when you were living in Košice, there was a man that escaped from Auschwitz, and he came to your town. Tell us about that.
It was a very interesting story. One day we were at home. We didn't knew anything about Auschwitz, and we didn't knew that people were killed there. It was a man about 35, 40 years old, might be only 30 years old, and he came and asked for the first time from mother that he needs some shorts and a coat and some money and something to eat, because he fled on the way. He knew that other people from Poland are taken to Auschwitz, and he fled, and he came to our town, Košice. And what he said, the father and the mother didn't want to believe. It was so terrible, the story, what he said. But after a few weeks, we came to the same place, to Auschwitz, and we saw that every word what he said, it is true. And then began the tragedy of not only our tragedy, but the tragedy of all people who were with us. We were in Košice, 12,000 Jewish people from the town and from the surroundings. And we were taken in by train, but the train were like for animals. 60, 70 people were in one place, and we had nothing to eat and nothing to drink for 2-3 days until we arrived to Auschwitz.
Touching hearts, expanding understanding, impacting actions. The vision of the Holocaust Remembrance Association is to see the world inspired to stand in solidarity against persecution, prejudice, and indifference. Discover, learn, and partner with the Holocaust Remembrance Association's many initiatives by visiting www.hra18.org. Come back for free refills and meet friends like these, whose stories will touch hearts, expand understanding, and impact actions. Share the link with friends. Discover Holocaust Remembrance Association's virtual and live events at www.hra18.org.
Welcome back to, everybody got their cups? Oh yes, a virtual coffee encounter.
As one says in German, to your health.
Oh, to your health.
Yeah.
We are having a virtual coffee encounter with
Wonderful.
Emanuel Rund and Dr. Ozsvath from Hungary. And I hope that you liked that little piece of my Aunt Aggie. You know, one little thing before we bring Dr. Ozsvath to speak a bit. When we were doing a Holocaust March of Remembrance here in Houston a lot before COVID, Marty Fine, who was the commissioner, the head commissioner for the Texas Holocaust Genocide Commission, said to me when he heard a little bit of my story one day, he said, "Rosalie, you must meet Dr. Ozsvath. She's telling what happened to your family," because my family lived in Budapest and Sopron and all, Hungary. She's telling it from a child's perspective. You have to read her book, When the Danube Ran Red. And I read the book, and my mother, my father used to always say that my mom was hidden in a hospital. And I never understood, what does it mean, hidden in a hospital? Until I read your book, Dr. Ozsvath. I had to read your book to believe my own family.
Thank you.
Really, it was very important. It was like, oh, because your dad was doing everything to get you to that hospital, to hide you.
That's right.
That made it real for me.
That's right.
Chris, can you go ahead and jump in here for a minute?
Yes, I am actually very moved listening to these talks and to this coffee time, because it just occurred to me, Dr. Ozsvath, that my very best friend, well, I knew this, but the coincidence of this particular interview is my best friend when I was 10 years old was a girl named Mariana Bronner. And her family was Hungarian Jews, a family of Hungarian Jews. And guess where we lived? We lived in Princeton Junction, New Jersey. So things are full circle. And I still am in loose touch with her. She's a PhD researcher doing postdoctoral work on some sort of aspect of the neurology of bird brains. So I have this impression that Hungarians are by nature brilliant, along with the Israelis, because I read a lot about Israeli scientific discoveries. And it's sort of full circle for me to start out with a 10-year-old best friend whose parents, entire families other than themselves, were murdered at Auschwitz. She fled with her family in the Hungarian revolt in 1956. And then I met Rosalie, who is the daughter of Hungarian Holocaust survivors. And of course, I've met you, Dr. Ozsvath, and it's just such a privilege to learn more and more. And after I got involved with the march, I did call my friend and talk to her about what her mother ever talked to the children about. And she told me her mother in her 80s still had not talked. So perhaps you could share with us a little bit about the stories. We know that over 420,000 Jews were deported from Hungary, specifically to Auschwitz, in a very short period of time. Of those who survived that you happen to know personally, could you share a couple of key points or insights about their stories as survivors?
I mean, they have really undergone, I think, the worst, if there is such a thing, that there is a fate that is the worst in Auschwitz, if there is such a thing in the world, because Auschwitz was the unimaginable horror. hell itself. But the Hungarian Jews were the last Jews deported because the Germans occupied Hungary in March 19th, 1944. And there was an incredible speed with which the Hungarians have followed the German demands. So the 19th of March, the Germans occupied Hungary. On the 5th of April, I mean 2 weeks later, we wore the yellow star. On the 2nd of May, started the deportation, and by the end of June, all Hungarian Jews, except those in Budapest, which were about 100,000, the rest whom they deported was over 500,000. So the 500,000 Jews were deported within, you know, we can count within 6 weeks.
Unbelievable.
So it was, we wore the yellow star on the 5th of April. By the end of May, all these hundreds of thousands of Jews were ghettoized. And by the 2nd of July, all Jews of Hungary were deported except those in Budapest.
Wow.
And that's the reason that we stayed alive, because had they deported us, we were children, I and my brother, I mean, we would have gone to the gas chamber, as we have lived in a town called Békéscsaba, which is close to the Romanian border. I'm just saying it, you can find it on the map. And all my schoolmates, we moved to Budapest when I was 10 years old. The Germans came in 1 year later.
Wow.
And when, I mean, all my friends were deported with their parents, and all of them were killed. There is not one who survived. My brother, who was 3 years, almost 4 older than I am, he had some schoolmates who survived, but none from my classes and under my classes. I mean, they have killed every person who was under 14 or so.
Well, as a child, how did you even process that kind of information? That's so traumatic.
Terribly difficult. You mean that they have killed my friends, or that the danger that comes towards us? You see, my parents have tried to hide for a long time the danger. I mean, they couldn't really, because on the street, we lived in a small town, on the street they screamed after me, Jew, 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 aren't you ashamed of yourself, you Jew, Jew, Jew. So it happened, but my father said, you know, that they are unintelligent, they are stupid, they are horrible, and they are anti-Semitic, and I shouldn't care about them. So that was possible until the Germans arrived in Hungary in 1944. And when they arrived, as I said, on the 19th of March, they arrived. On the 5th of April, we wore the yellow star. On the beginning of May, the ghettoization started, and by July 2nd, there were no Hungarian Jews in Hungary.
Excuse me, I forgot how old you said you were when the Germans came.
12.
12 years old.
12 years old, yes. And so it was, so by that time, I knew a lot, although my parents tried to hide it. So we had a walk, and there came some other people opposite to us, and they started to talk to one another. And my father said, go away, go and play with that dog on the street and on the sidewalk. And so, or he said, oh, here is this shop where you always wanted to go in. Why don't you go in and wait for me? So he didn't want me to hear it, but of course I have heard it.
Of
I
course.
had a classmate who fled from Poland with her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me when I was 10 that they fled from Poland and that her father and her grandfather and every man of the town where they came from was shot in the marketplace. And so I have heard that. So you
Right.
couldn't hide it from me, but it's
No.
still tried again and again. And so I lived this horror that my father will be shot on the marketplace. What saved our lives was that we moved away from that town called Békéscsaba. My father had a pharmacy, and he had to give away his pharmacy, or he had to sell it for much less money that it was
Right.
worth. And a Christian pharmacist has taken over. So this is what he did, and thank God he had a friend in Budapest, and that friend was Jewish, but he had suffered enormous wounds in the First World War, and he had some kind of exceptional hero title. And because of that hero title, he wasn't yet touched, despite the fact that the Germans,
Right.
that Hungary was on the side of the Germans. So he joined this big bicycle shop, and we lived there until 1944, when, of course, it was taken away from him too, because the Germans came in and the new Hungarian government came. And so then it started, as I said, March 19th, the Germans came in, April 5th, the Yellow Star, May 1st started the ghettoization. And the people who lived in the countryside were deported by July. And in July, Budapest, the Jews of Budapest should start. But that was I don't know, do you know that I am saying something that is well known? That was the first reaction of the Allies, who were prayed to bomb Germany, and later prayed to bomb Hungary in a way, the places where the trains stopped in order to destroy the ways to Poland, to the gas chambers.
Right.
And of course, nothing of that sort the Allies have done, as we know. And as I said, 500,000 Jews were deported from Hungary within 2 months. And but the Budapest Jews were not yet. And then you can read about this also a lot, because Roosevelt, who has always, who never listened to the begging of various Jewish organizations and major people to bomb Hungary, or to bomb the Germans, or to bomb the concentration camps, and finally gave in, because Roosevelt has written his first letter in which he threatens a head of government, and that was Horthy. And he has written to Horthy that Hungary will have to be responsible for what happens to the Budapest Jews. He has done nothing when the countryside Jews were taken away, 500,000. But with the Budapest Jews, he has written this letter, and Horthy has, the leader of Hungary, has stopped the deportation. So we were in a ghetto house until October 15th. So from the Germans came on March 19th and October 15th, we lived in the same house, although it was a ghetto house, but we still lived there. We were very lucky. It was a ghetto house and people were moved into our apartment, but we were still living there. And then a National Socialist government has taken over on October 15th. And at the end of October, my father was taken away, who fled and came back at the beginning of November. And shortly after, a few days after, we had to move out of our house where we were surviving during the summer of 1944. And then we ran to a pharmacy that was owned by some Jewish people, Jewish friends who had some exceptional possibility to stay in their pharmacy. It's a long story, but at the end, we fled there. And then, I don't know, do you know it or do I say obvious things, that there were then various, at that point, various countries have given protection to Jews. So there was such a thing as Swiss houses. There was such a thing as Italian houses, because Italy slowly got out of the war. And there was such a thing as Red Cross houses. And so we fled to a White Cross hospital. Now, you can go to the computer and try to research what a White Cross hospital is, because we have never found out. So what we think that it was simply named a White House hospital, and it was done, the exception was achieved by some young Jewish men who were dressed as National Socialists. So what it comes down to, there were Red Cross houses, Swedish houses with passports from Sweden. There were Swiss houses. There were, by the last 3 months, there were Portuguese houses. And then...
Wasn't it Wallenberg that started all that?
It is
the
Wallenberg,
other diplomats
yes.
caught on it.
It is Wallenberg who started it in the summer, but then he was also taken and killed by the Germans.
By the
Or
Soviets.
there are some
Russians,
people who say not by the Russians, yes.
Right.
And by the
That
way,
is what-
Dr. Ozsvath, just so you would know, let me do this here. Emanuel, one of the people I interviewed in the past is Morris Wolf, who is a civil rights lawyer, and he took on the Soviet Union to get Wallenberg back. He fought Soviet, and he won the case, but they never kept, their side of the bargain. And so he wrote a book. What is the name of the book, Emanuel?
What happened to Raoul Wallenberg?
Yeah, whatever happened to Wallenberg. And in my interview, you could see it on YouTube. It's called Rescuing the Rescuer. And we've just been speaking with Morris, and he's asking Emanuel to make a movie about Wallenberg and what he did. But go ahead, Zsuzsi, Dr. Ozsvath.
I mean, we also got Swedish passports during this time. It is not, I mean, we had all kinds of passports because the Nazis, then the Hungarian Nazis started then not to regard anything. So we were in a so-called Vatican house, we were in a so-called Swedish house, we were in a so-called Red Cross house, and then we were in a White Cross house.
Wow.
So we were really running from the 20th of November till the middle of January. So there were really, all the time, we were staying in one place and running away. I mean, not by ourselves, but we were saved by a young girl who was my parents, was first help in the pharmacy my father had, and then later she moved with us to Budapest. As we moved to Budapest, which I said saved our lives,
Right.
because we would have been killed in that town. But so, and then she, when the Germans came in, my father broke down and she said, everything is over. And Erzsi, this young girl, said, no. And my father said, how can you say no? And she said, because I am going to save you. And she indeed saved us through thousands of circumstances.
And how old was Erzsi?
23.
22.
22.
Very brave.
23-year-old saving a family.
Saving a family through thousands of deaths. I mean, she, for example, took me out and my brother from the ghetto with false papers. At that time, there were many Christians who lived in the ghetto, which was simply a part of Budapest that they named as ghetto, and they had the Christians move out and gave them the Jewish apartments and had the Jews move in. So, 48 and 50 people in an apartment and so on. And 2 or 3 or 4 bedroom apartments. I mean, there were no 4 bedrooms, 2 or 3 bedrooms. So anyway, Erzsi has saved our lives. She took us out of the ghetto, me and my brother, and took my father to a Red Cross hospitalists, stood there and were asking for proof that I am Christian. And as she said, she's my, I am her aunt, she said. And so they looked at me, and then somehow my brother, all of us, through thousands of deaths. And the bombs were falling in the meantime. Look it up once, what Budapest, the attack against Budapest during the last 3 months of 1944 and then 1945. She took us on these streets, the bombs were falling and the cannons were working. And so anyway, we stayed alive. The 4 of us stayed alive. But father's brother and sister were killed, and my mother, all my mother's brothers and sisters, and all my young child as old as my brother and everybody. My parents had no family anymore, except of us. So, I don't hear you.
Yeah, we're having a little sound issue. Emanuel, I know we're going to have to end this for now, but we will have more coffee with you in the future, Dr. Ozsvath, because I know this is a hard
Wonderful.
topic. Emanuel has interviewed how many Holocaust survivors?
600 in 1980 in New York, and then throughout the 30 films, it reached so many more, and so thousands in a way. And I remember almost every story. And by the way, I created an archive since 1980 when I worked with Professor Elie Wiesel. And this archive, this interest actually in Texas, in America, actually in Dallas, actually at the Ackerman Center. There's interest. Coincidentally, there's interest that my work of over 40 will be taken and be hosted and housed at the Ackerman Center at the Dallas University of Texas. So I'll be with you.
You know that is where I am coming from. That I started the Holocaust Studies program.
I know, and thank you very much for starting it. So now I can work with you, continue, and keep the memory of the Holocaust alive and teach the youngsters to take positions whenever there's a genocide or any pogrom or any massacres in any country in the world. And that's what we do, education.
Well,
so I'll see you at some point soon.
So happy to connect you guys. Doesn't that make you feel something special, Dr. Ozsvath, to hear?
I don't know, special. I'm very happy. It makes me very happy.
Yeah. You've done a good work. All of us are working hard to fight for righteousness.
Thank you. So where are you? You are now in Dallas or where?
No, I'm in Jerusalem. But as soon as the possibility will come, I'll come and see you and fly over.
Fantastic.
And then I want to end with a short song of Hungarian Jew, Hannah Senes, who came from Hungary in the 40s to Israel, and she was parachuted over Hungary by the British Army to make connection to the resistance in Hungary. She got caught by the Nazis and tortured until her death. But before she parachuted in Hungary, she lived in Caesarea in a kibbutz north of Tel Aviv, and she wrote the song, Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer לעולם, החול והים, רשרוש על המים, חדוות השמיים, חדוות האדם, החול והים, al hamayim. So that was Hannah Senes. We should remember her and also all those Hungarian Jews who didn't make it, that didn't survive.
Yes.
And by the way, in one of my films, I filmed in Theresienstadt, the German woman, she was a friend of Adolf Eichmann in Theresienstadt, and she told about how he used to deport the millions of Jews from the camps to Auschwitz to kill them. So I'm very glad, Dr. Ozsvath, that you survived and your family and friends survived, some of them. And yeah, we have to keep the memory alive, make sure that nothing happened anywhere, and pray for everybody who is a good friendly. I even managed to get some neo-Nazis to become our friends. I infiltrated them, and they liked me so much that they told me everything about what they do and what they plan against the Jews in Germany. And so there's always a way to keep the youngsters, put them on the right path with us together.
Well, we hope that, our motto with the Holocaust Remembrance Association, thank you, Emanuel, is sensitizing hearts to the issues of the Holocaust. So I would like to speak to our viewers right now to please share this program link with your friends and subscribe to be notified by email and to be a part of our next virtual coffee encounter. And you'll come back for refills.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I had a
Thank you, everybody.
thank you, and it's
God bless.
wonderful to see you.
God bless
Yeah.
you.
See you all. Shalom, shalom from Jerusalem.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.